The garden had become more than a patch of earth where flowers grew. To me, it was a silent chronicle of time, seasons threading their colors through the soil like the years threading through my life. I found solace in the soft murmur of leaves and the distant call of birds, moments carved out of silence where the world felt less heavy. That morning, as pale sunlight filtered through the branches, I knelt beside the rose bushes, fingering the tender shoots with the care one gives to something fragile, something worth preserving. The scent of damp mulch mixed with the faint perfume of blossoms, stirring memories that drape themselves gently around my heart. Memories of children laughing, the brush of small hands in mine, the warmth of family. I paused, letting the quiet fill me. Behind me, the house stood still, its familiar creaks folded neatly into routine. A place I once considered sanctuary, built with love and effort, now felt unnervingly hollow, as if it kept secrets behind locked doors. The walls had witnessed years of stories, birthdays, first steps, whispered dreams, but in that silence, I sensed a brittle tension that prickled along my skin like the first drop of rain before a storm. It had begun subtly, small shifts in the way Thomas and Grace moved through the rooms. Their smiles no longer reached their eyes. Their greetings were clipped. I found their voices soft and guarded, especially when I entered a room suddenly. Once, they had been my anchors, my joy. Now, they felt like strangers draped in familiar faces, their presence unsettling a harmony I had taken for granted. Late the night before, I overheard them speaking. I had intended only to check a sound downstairs. But there, just beyond the doorframe, their conversation sliced through the quiet, sharp and cold. They spoke of my finances, the money set aside, the properties I owned, the shares and accounts I barely understood. Their words were clinical, detached, and cruelly precise. Plans were being drawn up, schemes to wrest control from me, their mother. The idea that this was not care but calculation unspooled like a slow poison. My breath caught. The room tilted as realization settled in. The children I had held through sleepless nights, who I had cheered for at every milestone, were plotting to betray the trust I gave them freely. Anguish welled in my chest, tempered by sharper sting. Disbelief that those I loved most could so casually regard me as a possession, an obstacle to their gain. Retreating back to my sanctuary of solitude, I found myself tracing the lines of family photos, faces frozen in happier times. Thomas with his mischievous grin, Grace with light dancing in her eyes. Moments when the world had been simple and love had felt unequivocal. But even then, change was creeping, hidden like an unwelcome whisper. That morning, reaching for the teacup on the kitchen counter, my fingers found something foreign. Beneath the edge of the cabinet, a small, black lens stared up at me, unblinking. My heart hammered as the weight of those hidden eyes bore down. It was no longer paranoia. The house had become a watchtower, silent but intrusive, with cameras tucked away like sinister sentinels. I moved stealthily through every room, uncovering more devices, each one proof of their betrayal. Beneath the surface of my home, where walls should protect and corners shelter, lies and suspicion had taken root. It felt impossible. My children, my flesh and blood, spying on me as though I were an adversary. The cameras symbolized control. My trust was a currency they sought to bankrupt quietly. Each camera reminded me I was no longer the family's center, but a subject of it. The house I had built with faith and love was now a cage, its walls lined with silent watchers. Loneliness seeped into my bones. In that stillness, I confronted a brutal truth tightening around my heart like a cold hand. My children were no longer the people I loved. Ambition and greed had transformed them into strangers, shadows in familiar skin. And yet, through this heartbreak, a fragile ember glowed deep inside me, a whisper that said this was not the end, but the beginning of another story. I closed the curtains slowly as afternoon light dimmed. The room softened into twilight. The house, once my refuge, now a battleground where I must stand watch. My fortress had become a watchtower, but from this silent vigil, I knew I would learn to see anew, not just their betrayals, but the depths of my strength, a strength they had greatly underestimated. Tonight, I would sleep with eyes open, not from fear, but from resolve. What was mine, I would protect, not with loud accusations or bitter fights, but with steady patience and silent strength. The quiet woman they thought they knew was not so easily broken. As the garden stirred gently in the evening breeze, I made a silent promise to myself. From now on, I would watch back. The house had never felt so quiet, yet the silence was heavier than ever before, dense with the unspoken truths that weighed on my soul. Each morning I went through the motions, watering the garden, preparing meals, folding laundry, yet inside I was adrift, held captive by a storm of sorrow, disbelief, and guarded resolve. Familiar tasks felt hollow, mechanical, as if my body operated on autopilot while my mind wrestled with the sting of betrayal. Their faces lingered in my thoughts, not with anger, but with a profound sadness so deep it settled like a stone in my chest. I remembered the small and precious moments: Thomas's first unsteady steps across the living room floor, Grace's bright laughter filling the house on rainy afternoons, the countless nights I stayed awake, cradling their fears and dreams. I had given everything, my nights, my strength, my hopes, in a silent devotion that I never expected would be repaid with cold calculation. And yet, that was exactly what this betrayal was, a calculated infringement masked in the language of care. Their ambition, their sense of entitlement, had turned the love I nurtured into a commodity to be exploited. My spirit, once so full of hope for their futures, now felt bruised and weary. That I found no fire for confrontation in my heart, no roaring anger to hurl their way. Instead, a quiet grief took root, accompanied by a patient determination that grew with each passing day. I realized quickly that anger, and especially loud confrontation, would play directly into their hands. If I wanted to protect not only my assets, but the dignity and legacy I had built over decades, I needed a different approach. Strength, I learned, could be found not in battles fought with noise and fury, but in quiet endurance and watchful patience. Each evening, lying awake in the dim light, I revisited the years I had devoted to building this family, from sleepless nights, nursing fevers, to the hopeful milestones and small victories I had quietly celebrated. These memories offered both comfort and sorrow, a landscape where love and betrayal intertwined. As much as it pained me, I buried the past with a resolute heart and turned toward the future. No longer would I be the woman who gave everything without question. I was becoming the woman who observed, who measured, who planned. A silent warrior learning to navigate a battleground built within her own walls. With a keen eye, I began to watch them more closely. Subtle signs emerged quickly. Hurried phone calls halting abruptly when I entered the room, exchanged glances heavy with undocumented schemes, whispered conversations when I was out of earshot. Words like transfer, inheritance, and lawyer floated repeatedly in the air, confirming the depths of their duplicity. Instead of confrontation, I chose vigilance. I learned their rhythms, when they came and went, whom they met, and which stories did not add up. I became a shadow in my own home, gathering the strands of truth carefully, quietly. If this was a game of power, I was determined to master it with steady patience. In the stillness of early mornings, I revisited the inheritance fund I had always kept secret, not out of mistrust, but as a safeguard. Modest, yes, but it was my hidden strength, a quietly guarded resource that no one suspected. Managing this discreet account had always been a comfort, a private assurance, but now it was my shield, my lifeline in a war my children didn't know I was preparing to fight. I returned to writing, a habit I had neglected over the years. Journaling brought order to the chaos swirling through my heart and mind. I filled pages now with reflections, observations, and plans, etching a ledger of truths that could no longer be ignored. It was therapy and strategy intertwined, a way to channel my pain into clarity. The loneliness pressed down on me with relentless weight. Those I once reveled in, their smiles, their voices, had morphed into distant figures, polite and guarded. Our conversations were stitched with politeness and veiled intentions, their concern laced with ulterior motives. I saw through their facades, recognized the calculated charm intended to disarm me, and felt the sting of those betrayals in every exchange. Still, I was determined not to succumb to despair. I reminded myself that silence was not surrender. My strength blossomed in quiet moments, in the final sip of evening tea, the turning of a well-worn book's page, and the steady pulse of life returning to the garden I tended with such care. Among the roses and blooming perennials, hope took root again with a gentle resilience, promising renewal despite the storm. I pictured their faces when the truth finally came to light, the shock, the frustration, the disbelief. But I pushed away the temptation for premature exposure. No dramatic revelation would serve me this time. Instead, I resolved to be the keeper of secrets, covertly weaving a tapestry of resistance by patiently gathering the evidence and gathering my strength. Unseen and unheard, I became a presence in the house that watched and waited. I noted their restlessness, their careless swagger, their confidence in a victory yet unearned. They underestimated not only me, but the steady power of a mother's resolve honed by patience and quiet fury. They saw a tired woman, a fading figure of years past. Yet beneath the calm surface lay a spirit anchored deep with unwavering strength. Born from love, tempered by treachery, this strength was quiet but unstoppable. Each dawn greeted me with renewed purpose. I nurtured my own quiet world, the garden, the house, the everyday routines that masked the storm my mind was brewing. Each night, as the world outside slipped into stillness, I reflected on the sacrifices I made, not merely for them, but for myself and for the woman I was becoming. I was no longer a victim of their greed and deceit. In the silence of patience, I was building my own justice. The future remained uncertain, but I faced it with a courage born of endurance and clarity. The quiet woman they thought they knew was awakening. That spirit, the true core of me, would not be broken. I would wait, I would watch, and when the time came, I would act. The house had taken on a new rhythm, one that melded my quiet determination with the relentless pulse of watchfulness. I moved through familiar rooms with a new purpose, my footsteps silent but deliberate, my eyes always alert to the subtle shifts that betrayed intentions too well hidden. The home I'd built with love and memories was now a silent battlefield. Each corner, each shadow, a place where secret truths were both spoken and concealed. I embraced the role of the unseen observer with a resolve that surprised even me. The children I had once cradled in my arms and nurtured with boundless hope were now players in a dangerous game, and I had to master the art of patience and stealth. Every gesture, every whisper, every hurried glance became a thread in the intricate web I was slowly weaving, a tapestry destined to reveal the truth that their greed had obscured. I found a small notebook buried in the back of a drawer, its pages crisp and waiting. I began to write again, my pen moving with steady purpose as I documented the times of secret calls, the surreptitious meetings, the strange withdrawals from accounts I thought I controlled outright. Nothing escaped my notice, not the hurried exchanges between Thomas and Grace about transfers or inheritance, nor the sharp intakes of breath when certain names were dropped in their hushed conversations. The very cameras they had hidden throughout the house, perhaps expecting to spy unchecked, turned into my unwilling allies. Evening after evening, I reviewed their footage on the small tablet I secretly kept in my room. I watched their unfiltered expressions, Thomas's impatience simmering beneath his polished exterior, Grace's cunning as she negotiated relentless deals over real estate. Their sins, no longer whispered under the cloak of secrecy, lay bare before me. One recording sent an icy chill down my spine. Thomas and Grace spoke candidly, plotting to contest the will and rewrite the future I'd envisioned for our family. Their voices dripping with entitlement and without a shred of remorse. They saw me as an obstacle, not a mother. That heartless calculation fueled a fire deep within me. I was no fragile relic to be dismissed. I sought out Margaret, my steadfast friend and lawyer, who had stood beside me through many of life's storms. Her office reeked of old books and determination, a sanctuary of justice in contrast to my crumbling family. The moment I laid out the evidence, audio recordings, financial statements, forged signatures, her face hardened with resolve. "We have a strong case," she said quietly. "They won't see you coming." Together, we began building a fortress of legal protections, powers of attorney carefully revised, trusts reinforced, accounts shielded from unauthorized access. Each step was deliberate, each precaution a brick added to the walls shielding my life's work. Margaret's sharp mind and unwavering loyalty became my sword and shield in this war of wills. Beyond law, I took other steps, invisible and unfathomable to Thomas and Grace. Under the guise of routine, I moved quietly to safeguard my assets, discreetly selling valuables they coveted, transferring funds into accounts they couldn't touch. I orchestrated these acts with careful timing, home repairs scheduled to mask meetings with brokers, casual comments designed to allay suspicion while the real work spun silently in the background. Their own miscalculations became clear as I uncovered forged documents, unauthorized withdrawals, and attempts to manipulate my decisions. The depth of their betrayal shocked me, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so complete. I saw Grace sneaking into my study one rainy afternoon through the lenses of my hidden cameras, desperation driving her frantic search for leverage in my papers. I reacted swiftly. Passwords changed, files locked away in hidden folders, safe keys deposited in places only I knew. The house regained its strength, no longer a prison but a fortress once more. And while I played the part of the calm, gracious mother, offering favorite meals, smiling at their jokes, I was growing into something far stronger beneath that surface. This dual existence, mother by day, strategic watcher by night, wearied my heart and exhausted my spirit. But I could no longer afford the luxury of weakness. Each sacrifice I had made, each tear I had swallowed, was now fuel for my vengeance and fortification. With winter's approach, tension thickened in the air, yet Thomas and Grace remained blind to the fortress I was building around us all. Their arrogance, their careless swagger, convinced them of a victory that was slipping through their fingers in silence. I was no longer merely the betrayed mother. I was a strategist, methodical, patient, unyielding. The evidence in my hands was a shield. Margaret's counsel, a sword sharpened for justice. Every night, as the world outside hushed into darkness, I prepared further for the reckoning that was coming. The quiet woman they had dismissed was awakening. Born of love, tempered by sorrow and betrayal, my strength was now undeniable. They had underestimated me at their peril. I would wait, I would watch, and when the time was right, I would act, not with anger or haste, but with the steady, unrelenting power of one who has been wronged and has found her way back to herself. The weight of winter settled heavily upon the house, yet inside a quiet transformation was underway, one not marked by noise or outcry, but by subtle shifts and steady progress. Each morning, I moved through the familiar spaces with a renewed sense of purpose. The garden lay dormant beneath frost's icy blanket, but I tended it still, my hands coaxing promise from the cold soil. Meals were prepared with meticulous care and calm efficiency. I maintained the outward rhythm expected of me, the serene facade of a mother tending to her family, while beneath the surface, I orchestrated the dismantling of the world Thomas and Grace thought was theirs to command. The first strategic moves were modest but meaningful. I sold a family heirloom, an antique necklace they coveted yet never truly cherished. The transaction was silent and untraceable to their eager eyes. The proceeds redirected to an account I controlled alone. Though small, this act held powerful symbolism, threads quietly rewoving into a safety net of my own design, a buffer against the storm their greed unleashed. The house became a battleground and a refuge transformed. Scheduled repairs, innocuous on their face, a leaking faucet, a sagging doorframe, were my cloak for clandestine meetings with legal advisors and trusted financial experts. The occasional visit of repairmen was less about fixing and more about maintaining the cover for the real work, crafting protections and uncertainties far beyond their suspicion. Margaret, unwavering and wise, served as my northern star. Her counsel guided me steadily through legal labyrinths I once feared. Together, we fortified my position within the tangled web of trusts, powers of attorney, and financial shields. Their exploitative ambitions were blocked at every turn by documents she crafted with precision and law's stern power. With her by my side, I was no longer isolated and vulnerable, but armed and resolute. Behind my composed exterior, a fierce fire kindled. I smiled in their presence, prepared favored meals, and engaged in family conversations with warmth they expected. Yet beneath that calm lay a calculated defiance. While Thomas and Grace chased dreams of control, I unraveled their schemes silently and deliberately. One crisp morning remains vivid. I watched confirmation of a large transfer into a newly established secure account. The click of confirmation was an exclamation point signed in digital ink, a reclaiming of power I had long been denied. Each such action, hidden and careful, built the foundations of my renewed strength. Their routines, Thomas's endless office hours and Grace's frequent trips abroad, became carefully timed opportunities. I operated unseen, moving assets, revising legal documents, and reinforcing barriers. Each small move was a knot tied in a net that would soon envelop their plans. Social occasions morphed into subtle games of intellect and will. I'd ask innocuous questions, probing for knowledge they did not possess, watching as slight hesitations crossed their faces. Their attempts at manipulation, thinly veiled beneath smiles and sweet words, met the cool surface of my indifference. I never revealed more than I intended. The delicate balancing act required relentless restraint. Premature exposure of my awareness would unravel everything I'd built, so I moved with deliberate care, patience the ally that would turn the tide. Weekends became my retreats into knowledge, hours immersed in legal tomes, financial analyses, and stories of others who'd fought silence and won. These quiet studies tempered my mind and steeled my heart in preparation for the battles yet to come. The physical spaces of my home became refuges of both memory and proof. Tucking away valuables in secret compartments, cataloging precious heirlooms with detailed photographs, I prepared not just for confrontation, but for justice. These records were my shield against any claim of ignorance or weakness. Evenings found me in the garden, the tender resilience of plants pushing through frost, striking a deep chord within. They reminded me that strength often flourishes quietly, nurtured by patience and care, even in the harshest conditions. Watching life persist beyond the chill filled me with an unexpected hope, the same hope that kindled my own steadfast journey. Memories of gentler times gave me strength. The laughter of my children, once pure and carefree, now served as a reminder of what love once was and must still be protected. My love remained fierce, but tempered by the clear understanding that protection sometimes demanded hardness. The darkest hours brought doubts and fatigue. The solitude at times felt suffocating, but I forced myself onward. Each tear swallowed and sacrifice endured was not loss, but the fuel feeding the fire of justice to come. My plan was a symphony composed of legal protections woven with financial maneuvers, all underscored by vigilant watchfulness. I was no longer prey caught in their schemes, but a quiet strategist building walls and setting traps. Thomas and Grace moved with false confidence, unaware of the fortress rising around them, brick by silent brick, thread by patient thread. The home they thought they controlled was slipping slowly but surely from their grasp. Seasons turned and nights grew colder, yet my spirit remained undimmed, a mother shaped by patience, sharpened by betrayal, and empowered by quiet strength. When the inevitable moment of reckoning came, I would stand unshaken, not with rage or haste, but with the unwavering power of one who has endured wrongs and emerged unbroken, a woman who has watched, waited, and regained her place in the story, a mother ready to reclaim her rightful legacy. The day Thomas and Grace returned from their weekend trip, the air in the house shifted subtly, yet the change was unmistakable. They walked through the front door with the same confident ease, filled with the unshakable conviction of those who believe victory lies within their grasp. Their laughter filled the hallways, careless and free, as if the house and its secrets belonged to them alone. I met them with a calm that surprised even myself. My face was a mask of serenity, betraying no hint of the storm inside. Years of patience and careful planning had prepared me for this moment. To them, I appeared as the quiet mother they had always known, but beneath that composed exterior, I held an unyielding resolve. We gathered in the living room, the very space that once echoed with children's laughter and family joy. Now it was heavy with tension, the air thick and uneasy. This was no ordinary family reunion. It was a reckoning. The evidence I had amassed over months of vigilance now lay ready to confront its source. With steady hands, I began to unveil what I had collected: the recordings of whispered schemes, the altered contracts, the unauthorized withdrawals, all the pieces of their betrayal laid bare. The room grew silent, save for the faint crackling of the fireplace, as the undeniable truth took form in the quiet presentation. Their faces changed, disbelief shifting swiftly to shock, then to a simmering anger that they struggled to contain. Yet I stood firm, meeting their gazes without flinching. "You thought I was blind," I said softly but with conviction. "I saw everything, heard every word, waited patiently for this day." Thomas attempted to respond, anger flashing in his eyes, but I raised a hand, silencing him. No more lies, no more deceptions. A heavy silence settled over us, pressing and suffocating. Grace shifted uncomfortably, her usual confidence waning under the weight of undeniable evidence. Their masks crumbled, revealing fragile facades beneath. I presented copies of the evidence to Margaret's representative, signaling that the next steps toward justice were underway. The law, once distant and impersonal, had now become a tangible force standing with me. "You underestimated a mother's love and endurance," I continued, voice steady. "You thought silence was weakness. It was patience. You thought I would fall beneath deceit. Instead, I rose." Tears glistened in their eyes, not of remorse, but raw shock at their unmasking. The fractured family they had tried to control now faced the ruin of their greed's consequences. Though sorrow touched my heart for the loss of what we once had, a deeper strength rose within me. This was not defeat, but triumph, the reclaiming of dignity and peace earned through years of quiet fortitude. Their attempts to deflect blame and cast accusations fell flat against the irrefutable truth. I held my ground, a pillar of steady justice amid the chaos they created. I recalled the nights filled with silent tears and loneliness, moments now transformed into seeds of strength. Each sacrifice and every swallowed sob had forged this unbreakable spirit. In that room, infused with the echoes of laughter and pain, a new chapter began, a chapter where betrayal met reckoning and justice rose quietly but undeniably. I had become more than a victim. I was the victor of a long, silent war. The vigil had ended. The quiet woman they dismissed had spoken, her voice carrying the power of truth and love unyielding. With evidence in the hands of justice and the weight of truth filling the space, I knew healing was on the horizon, not only for myself, but perhaps even for those I once called my children. The confrontation concluded, yet the journey continued. For the first time in years, hope stirred anew, the lightness of peace edging into my soul. This victory was not mine alone. It was a testament to the enduring strength of a mother's love, a silent fire that no betrayal could extinguish, and an unwavering patience that, at last, revealed the deepest justice. I stood at the center, not broken, not defeated, but whole and ready to rebuild, to reclaim, and to live free once more. With the legal battle set in motion and the truth finally unveiled, a calmness settled over me, a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. The weight of betrayal, the endless nights filled with doubt and fear, began to lift, dissolving slowly like mist under the morning sun. My home, once shadowed by suspicion and fear, blossomed again into the sanctuary I had longed for, a place where I could breathe freely without the burden of watching and being watched. Walking through the rooms, I noticed the subtle changes that freedom brings. The familiar creaks of the floorboards were no longer the hollow reminders of hidden cameras and whispered secrets. Instead, they sang the soft songs of time passing on my own terms. The walls that once felt like prison bars now whispered stories of resilience and hope, a testament to the battles fought quietly and the victories won with patience and strength. I returned to the garden with renewed vigor, my hands feeling the earth's enduring promise beneath the cold frost. Planting new seeds and tending to the roses was more than a pastime. It was a ritual of healing. Each fragile bloom pushing through the ice mirrored the resurgence I felt within, a living symbol of endurance and slow, steady growth. As the seasons changed, so too did I, embracing the quiet miracles of nature as a beacon for my own journey forward. The colors of spring returned to my life in brushstrokes and words. Books, long neglected, became companions once more. Their pages gateways to distant places and emotions that reignited my spirit. I picked up my paintbrush again, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence, allowing colors to spill across canvas, expressing feelings too deep for words. These acts of creation felt like reclaiming pieces of myself, layers of identity buried beneath years of sacrifice and sorrow. My heart still carried the tender ache of what was lost, memories of laughter and warmth that now felt distant, but I refused to let bitterness take root. I embraced those emotions, letting sorrow soften into understanding and courage bloom in its place. Justice, I realized, was not merely about righting wrongs or punishing deceivers. It was about reclaiming dignity, restoring balance and opening space for healing. Nights came with their familiar shadows, moments when loneliness whispered cold truths and fatigue pressed deep into my bones. Yet each time, I summoned the strength born from years of watching silently, waiting patiently. Every tear shed in solitude, every burden carried alone, had forged an unbreakable spirit, one that would no longer be hidden or silenced. The keys to my home, once symbols of uncertainty and contested inheritance, now rested firmly in my grasp. They were more than metal. They were monuments to resilience, tokens of hard-fought freedom, and promises of a future shaped by my own hand. I held them with reverence, feeling the solidity of my renewed agency in their weight. What had been my fortress transformed into a watchtower, not one of fear or suspicion, but of vigilance and empowerment. From this vantage, I viewed a horizon filled with possibilities, the promise of days shaped by choice, love, and the quiet strength that had carried me through darkness. Challenges remained, shadows that tried to creep back at the edges of my peace, but I met them with the calm assurance of one who has endured and emerged whole. My journey was no longer defined by betrayal or loss, but by a deeper understanding of resilience and the power of silence turned to strength. This chapter of my life was mine to write, a narrative woven with lessons learned, love rediscovered, and hope rekindled. And as dusk fell over the garden, where roses swayed softly in the evening breeze, I smiled with quiet certainty. The woman who had once been silent was now free, free to live with courage, grace, and the enduring light of a mother's love that no shadow could ever extinguish.